30 minutes before my surgery, I was waiting in that cold hospital hallway, my heart pounding like an uncontrolled drum. The white walls seemed to close in on me, and the smell of disinfectant turned my stomach. I was wearing that horrible hospital gown that makes you feel vulnerable, exposed, as if you no longer even own your own dignity. At 72 years old, I never thought I would be there, waiting for them to open my chest for heart surgery, praying to God that everything would go well. My name is Catherine Sterling, and my whole life I have been a strong, independent woman. After my husband died 10 years ago, I built a real estate empire worth more than $2 million, properties in the city center, luxury apartments, plots of land that increase in value every year. I did it all thinking of my only daughter, Jessica, and my grandchildren. I wanted to leave them a secure future, an inheritance that would give them peace of mind for their entire lives. That morning, Jessica had arrived early at the hospital. I saw her appear down the hall in her elegant red dress, high heels echoing against the floor, and that smile that always calmed me. My daughter, my treasure, the person I trusted most in this world. Michael, my son-in-law, arrived shortly after, dressed in his impeccable gray suit, tie perfectly knotted, with that successful man attitude I had always found so admirable. For 5 years, he had been like the son I never had. "Mom, everything's going to be just fine," Jessica had told me, stroking my hand with those soft fingers I remembered from when she was a little girl. "Dr. Evans is the best cardiologist in the city. In a few hours, you'll be good as new, running around like always." Michael nodded beside her, with that confident look that gave me so much reassurance. "Catherine, you are a very strong woman. This surgery is nothing for someone like you." I felt blessed to have such a family. Jessica had been with me at every doctor's appointment over the past few months, organizing everything, asking the doctor about every detail of the procedure. Michael had taken care of speaking with the insurance company, coordinating payments, and making sure I had the best private room in the hospital. They seemed like a perfect couple, united, genuinely concerned for my well-being. The room I was in was spacious, with large windows that let in the golden morning light. There were fresh flowers on the nightstand that Michael had brought that very morning, white lilies that perfumed the air and reminded me of my garden at home. On the wall hung a painting of a mountain landscape that gave me a strange sense of peace, as if it were a window to a better, calmer world. I remember staring at that painting as I waited, thinking of all the beautiful moments I had lived. My wedding to Robert, the birth of Jessica, her first steps, her graduation, the day she met Michael and told me she had found the love of her life. All those memories seemed to form a perfect movie of family happiness. Michael had always been attentive to me. Every Sunday he would come to my house for lunch, help me with the property documents, and explain investments with a patience few young men have for older women. "Mother-in-law," he would say with that charming smile, "you are very smart when it comes to business. You should teach me more of your tricks." And I, like a fool, felt flattered, proud to have such a respectful son-in-law. But then, everything changed in an instant that would mark my life forever. I was lying on that stiff gurney, pretending to sleep because my nerves had exhausted me, when I heard them talking in the hallway. At first, their voices were distant, but they grew closer until they were right on the other side of my partially open room door. Michael's voice came through clearly, conspiratorial, charged with an emotion I had never heard in him before. "Jessica, in 3 hours, it will all be over. You have the documents ready, right?" His tone was cold, calculating, completely different from the caring man I knew. My heart sped up, and not because of the surgery awaiting me. "Yes, honey," my daughter replied in a voice that chilled my blood. "The fake will is perfect. As soon as she doesn't wake up from the anesthesia, or if she ends up in a vegetative state, we can proceed. The doctors already said that at her age, with her heart condition, complications are very likely." I was completely paralyzed. A fake will? A vegetative state? What were they talking about? My own children, the people I trusted most, were standing right there, discussing my death as if it were a business transaction. "Perfect," Michael continued, and I could hear him rubbing his hands together in satisfaction. "I've already spoken with the crooked notary. As soon as we have the death certificate or the declaration of mental incompetence, we can transfer the properties. The downtown apartments are worth $1.2 million, the land another $600,000, and the main house another $200,000. Almost $2 million, Jessica. We'll be rich. And the best part, my daughter added with a laugh that pierced me like a knife, is that no one will suspect a thing. Everyone will think it was a natural complication from the surgery, an accidental death, or at worst, she'll be a vegetable and we can manage her assets with power of attorney. My own mother, reduced to a signature on a document. In that moment, I felt as if the world was collapsing around me. The room began to spin, the white walls blurred, and a terrible nausea rose in my throat. How was it possible that my own daughter, the child I had raised with so much love, was planning my death? How was it possible that this man I considered a son was calculating the value of my life in dollars? My hands began to tremble uncontrollably, and I had to bite my lips to keep from screaming. Every word that came from their mouths was like a direct stab to the heart. My own flesh and blood, my own daughter, was standing right there calculating how much money she would get from my death. It was so surreal, so impossible to process, that for a moment I thought I might be hallucinating from the pre-op medication. And if something goes wrong with the plan? I heard Jessica ask, her voice sounding nervous, as if she were finally considering the consequences of their plot. What if she survives the surgery without complications? What if she wakes up perfectly fine? Michael let out a sinister laugh I will never forget. Don't worry, honey, I've already taken care of that too. I spoke with Mark, the night shift nurse. I paid him $5,000 to accidentally give her an extra dose of morphine during recovery. It will be impossible to detect in an autopsy. It will look like a normal post-operative complication. I felt the blood freeze in my veins. Mark, the nurse who had always seemed so kind, so professional, he was involved in this diabolical conspiracy too? My world was falling apart piece by piece, and all I could do was lie there, pretending to be asleep, while I listened to the details of my own murder. Perfect, Jessica replied, and the relief in her voice made me sick. So it doesn't matter what happens in the surgery. One way or another, by tonight, Mom won't be with us anymore. And tomorrow morning, we'll be millionaires. Exactly. And think about it, Jessica. We won't have to pretend we care anymore. We won't have to come over every Sunday to listen to her repetitive stories about the past. We won't have to put up with her advice on how to manage our marriage. We'll finally be free and rich. Every word was a hammer blow to my soul. Repetitive stories, annoying advice. For all these years, I had believed they enjoyed my company, that they valued our family relationship. I had tried so hard to be a good mother, a good mother-in-law, a good grandmother. I had given them everything I had, not just materially, but emotionally. And it turns out it had all been a lie, a perfect performance to keep me trusting until the moment came to execute their macabre plan. The only thing that bothers me a little, Jessica continued in a thoughtful tone, is that the kids will ask about their grandmother. What are we going to tell them? We'll tell them Grandma was very old, that her heart just couldn't take it anymore, and that now she's in heaven watching over them. Kids forget quickly. Jessica, in a few months, they won't even remember her. And when they grow up, they'll only remember that their grandmother left them an inheritance that allowed them to have a comfortable life. My grandchildren, my little treasures, 5 and 7 years old. I thought of their angelic faces, how they would run to me every Sunday shouting Grandma Catherine, with that pure joy only children can feel. I remembered the afternoons we spent playing in the garden, the stories I told them before bed, the cookies we baked together. Was all of that going to disappear? Were they going to grow up thinking their grandmother had simply passed away, without knowing that their own parents had planned her death? Besides, Michael added, with a coldness that made me shiver, with $2 million, we can move to Miami, start a new life, far from this place. The kids will adapt quickly to the change. They can go to the best private schools. We'll have a house on the beach, a completely different lifestyle. I love that idea, Jessica replied with genuine enthusiasm. I've always dreamed of living near the ocean, and with that money, we could travel through Europe, buy designer clothes, dine at the best restaurants. It would be the perfect life. The perfect life, built on my corpse. The perfect life, financed with the blood of the woman who had given them everything. It was so grotesque, so inhuman, that I couldn't believe I was hearing these words from my own daughter's mouth. The little girl I had carried in my arms, whom I had fed, whom I had comforted when she had nightmares, whom I had cheered for at every school play, whom I had supported in every important decision of her life. And the funeral? Michael asked with chilling pragmatism. Something elegant, or should we keep it simple? Something elegant, but not too expensive, Jessica replied immediately. We have to look grief-stricken, but we don't want to spend too much of the inheritance on the funeral. A decent casket, nice flowers, and an emotional ceremony where we can cry convincingly in front of everyone. Cry convincingly. Those words were seared into my mind like a branding iron. My own daughter was already rehearsing how to fake grief over my death, how to play the part of the bereaved daughter so no one would suspect the truth. It was such an elaborate, cold performance that I realized they had probably been planning this for months, maybe even years. Perfect. And after the funeral, we wait a week or two to process the legal documents. We don't want to seem desperate. We have to keep up appearances, Michael concluded. At that moment, I heard footsteps approaching down the hall. It was Nurse Brenda, an older woman in her 50s who had been especially kind to me since I arrived at the hospital. Her steps were firm, and I could hear her white shoes approaching my room. Mrs. Sterling, Brenda said in a soft voice, in 15 minutes, we need to take you to the operating room. How are you feeling? Jessica and Michael hurried into the room, and suddenly their faces transformed completely. The perfect masks of family concern slipped over their features as if they were professional actors. Jessica approached my gurney with tears in her eyes. Tears I now knew were completely fake. Oh, Mom, you're awake. Did you hear anything? We were just talking in the hall about how nervous we are, she said with a performance so convincing that, had I not heard the previous conversation, I would have believed every word. No, honey, I was asleep, I mumbled, trying to control my voice so it wouldn't tremble. I just heard the nurse arrive. Michael stood on the other side of the gurney and took my other hand. His fingers felt cold, like a reptile's, but his smile was warm and reassuring. Catherine, we want you to know that we'll be right here waiting for you when you come out of surgery. Don't you worry about a thing. We'll take care of everything while you recover. Yes, they would take care of everything. They would take care of my death, my funeral, dividing my inheritance, moving to Miami with blood-stained money. The irony was so cruel it made me want to laugh and cry at the same time. Brenda began to prepare the gurney to move me to the OR, checking medical documents, adjusting the blankets, verifying my ID bracelet. The whole normal pre-surgery protocol for what could be my last, but which instead of being a medical procedure to save my life, had become the perfect opportunity for my own family to murder me. Are you ready, Mrs. Sterling? Brenda asked with that calming professionalism that characterized the best nurses. Yes, I replied, though inside I was screaming no, that I wasn't ready to die, that I didn't want my life to end in such a treacherous way. But a plan was forming in my mind, a desperate idea that maybe, just maybe, could save my life. As Brenda pushed my gurney down the hallways toward the operating room, my mind was racing. Every passing second was crucial. Every moment could be the difference between life and death. I knew I had to act fast, but I also had to be smart. If Jessica and Michael suspected I had overheard their conversation, they would accelerate their plans or find another way to eliminate me. Brenda, I whispered when we were far enough away from Jessica and Michael, I need to ask you a very important favor. It's an emergency. The nurse leaned toward me with genuine concern in her eyes. What's wrong, Mrs. Sterling? Are you feeling unwell? Should I call the doctor? No, it's not that. I need you to help me make a phone call before I go into the OR. It's urgent, a matter of life and death. My voice was trembling, but I tried to sound as convincing as possible. Brenda frowned, clearly confused. Ma'am, we're very close to the operating room. Dr. Evans is waiting for you. We can't delay the surgery. Please, I begged, grabbing her hand with what little strength I had. I just need 2 minutes. There's something I have to arrange urgently, something that can't wait. I promise, after that, we can proceed with the operation. Something in my tone must have convinced her, because Brenda stopped the gurney and looked me directly in the eye. Is this about your legal documents? Your will? Exactly, I replied quickly. There's a problem with my will that I just remembered. If something happens to me during the surgery, my family could have serious legal trouble. I just need to make a quick call to my lawyer. Brenda seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. All right, but it has to be very quick. I'll take you to a private room near the OR. You can make your call there while I tell the doctor we need 5 more minutes. My heart pounded, but this time with hope instead of terror. Brenda took me to a small room that looked like a doctor's office, with a desk, some chairs, and most importantly, a telephone. She helped me into a chair and handed me the receiver. "Thank you, Brenda. You don't know what this means to me," I said, real tears now streaming down my cheeks. With trembling hands, I dialed the number of Arthur, my trusted lawyer for the past 15 years. Arthur had handled all my legal affairs since my husband's death, structured my investments, drafted my real will, and most importantly, was one of the few people in the world I trusted completely. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. "Please, Arthur, pick up," I begged mentally. On the 4th ring, I heard his familiar voice. "Arthur Vance Law Office. This is Arthur." "Arthur, it's Catherine Sterling. I'm at St. Joseph's Hospital, about to go into surgery, and I need your help urgently. It's a life or death emergency." His tone changed immediately upon hearing the urgency in my voice. "Mrs. Sterling, what's happening? Are you all right?" "No, Arthur. I'm not all right. I've just discovered something terrible. Jessica and Michael are planning to kill me during or after the surgery to get my inheritance. They have a fake will and have bribed hospital staff." There was a tense silence on the other end of the line. "Mrs. Sterling, are you certain about what you're telling me? Those are very serious accusations." "Completely certain, Arthur. I heard them talking. They have everything planned. A nurse named Mark is going to give me extra morphine during recovery to kill me. They have a crooked notary ready to process a fake will. They're already planning to move to Miami with my money." "My God," Arthur murmured. "Where are you exactly right now?" "In a room near the operating room. I have maybe 2 minutes before the nurse comes to get me." "Arthur, I need you to get me out of here immediately. I can't go into that surgery. It's a trap." "I understand. Listen to me very carefully, Mrs. Sterling. Can you walk? Can you move on your own?" "Yes, I'm weak, but I can walk. The problem is I'm in a hospital gown and I don't have my clothes or my ID. Don't worry about that. I'm sending my assistant, Sarah, to the hospital immediately with clothes and everything you need. In the meantime, you have to get out of that operating room, no matter what. Make any excuse, but do not let them operate on you today. What if they suspect something? What if they realize I overheard them? Stay calm and act normally. Tell them you're feeling very nervous, that you want to postpone the surgery for a few days. It's normal for patients to have second thoughts before a major operation. Meanwhile, I'm going to contact the authorities and we're going to expose this whole plan." I heard footsteps approaching down the hall. "Arthur, someone's coming. What do I do?" "Stay calm. I'm hanging up now, but I want you to know that in 30 minutes, Sarah will be there with an escape plan. In the meantime, buy as much time as you can. And Mrs. Sterling, if you feel you are in immediate danger, scream, make a scene, get the attention of the whole hospital. Better they think you're crazy than for them to end up killing you." "Thank you, Arthur. You're my only hope." I hung up the phone just as Brenda appeared in the doorway. "Mrs. Sterling, have you finished your call? Doctor Evans is waiting for you in the operating room." "Brenda," I said, trying to sound as convincing as possible. After talking to my lawyer, I realized there are some legal issues I have to resolve before the surgery. Would it be possible to postpone it until tomorrow? The nurse looked at me with surprise. "Ma'am, that's highly unusual. The doctor is already scrubbed in, the surgical team is ready, and your family is waiting outside. Are you sure you want to cancel?" "Not cancel, just postpone for 1 day. My lawyer told me that if something happens to me during the operation, there are some documents that could cause legal problems for my family. I'd rather sort that out first to have peace of mind." Brenda seemed to understand my concern. "Well, I'll have to speak with Dr. Evans and the surgical coordinator. This will cause some inconvenience, but if it's really important to you, it's very important, Brenda. I would appreciate it so much." While Brenda went off to speak with the medical team, I sat in that chair, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst from my chest. I had bought myself a few precious minutes, but I knew the hardest part was yet to come. I had to face Jessica and Michael. I had to act as if I knew nothing, and I had to find a way to get out of the hospital without arousing suspicion. A few minutes later, Brenda returned accompanied by Dr. Evans, a man in his 60s with a gray beard and a serious expression. "Mrs. Sterling," the doctor said, "Brenda tells me you want to postpone the surgery. I must tell you, this is highly unusual. We have prepared everything to operate today, and your heart condition doesn't allow for much delay. Doctor, I understand completely, and I apologize for the inconvenience. But I've just realized there are some urgent legal matters I must resolve. It would only be a day's difference. Would it be possible to schedule it for tomorrow?" The doctor studied me carefully. "Are you feeling well physically? Is there no medical issue that's worrying you?" "No, doctor. Physically, I feel the same as I did this morning. It's just that I need to have peace of mind before going into the operating room." "Very well," Dr. Evans sighed. "We will reschedule the surgery for tomorrow at the same time. But I want you to know that we cannot do this frequently. Your heart needs this intervention urgently." "I understand, doctor. I'll be ready tomorrow, I promise." But inside, I knew that tomorrow I wouldn't be there. In 24 hours, if everything went according to Arthur's plan, I would be far from that hospital, far from the death trap my own family had prepared for me. Dr. Evans left the room to inform the surgical team about the change of plans, and Brenda helped me back to my original room. With every step we took down that white hallway, I felt like I was walking a tightrope over a chasm. Any false move, any suspicious gesture, could alert Jessica and Michael that something had changed. When we arrived at my room, I found my daughter and son-in-law exactly where I had left them. Jessica was sitting in the chair by the window, scrolling on her cell phone, while Michael paced back and forth with that nervous impatience I now understood perfectly. It wasn't concern for my well-being. It was anxiety to execute their macabre plan. "What happened, Mom?" Jessica asked immediately upon seeing me return on the gurney. "Why didn't they take you to the OR?" "I decided to postpone the surgery until tomorrow," I replied, trying to keep my voice as normal as possible. I got nervous and felt I needed one more day to prepare myself mentally. Michael approached the gurney with an expression that tried to be understanding, but I could see the frustration shining in his eyes. "Catherine, are you sure about that decision? The doctors said it was important to do the surgery as soon as possible." "Yes, I'm sure. It's just one day's difference. I'll feel calmer tomorrow." Every word I uttered was a superhuman effort to maintain my composure. Jessica exchanged a quick look with Michael, a look laden with meaning that I would have missed before, but which I could now interpret perfectly. It was frustration, it was concern about their plans being delayed, it was the silent communication of two accomplices whose timeline had just been altered. "Well, Mom, if that's your decision, we respect it," Jessica said, getting up to approach me. "The important thing is that you feel comfortable and calm." But there was something different in her attitude. Her movements were more tense, her smile more forced. It was as if she had detected that something wasn't quite right, even if she couldn't pinpoint exactly what. "You know what, Mom?" Jessica continued. "Maybe it's better if you stay alone for a while to rest. Michael and I are going to go get some lunch, and then we'll come back to keep you company this afternoon." "No, honey, you don't have to leave. I like having company," I replied quickly, because the last thing I wanted was to be left alone in that room where Mark, the corrupt nurse, might come to visit me. "We insist, Catherine," Michael said with that firm but gentle tone he used when he wanted things done his way. "You need to rest, and we also need to get some fresh air. It's been a very tense few hours for everyone." I had no choice but to agree. "All right, but don't be too long. I don't like being alone in the hospital." "We'll be back in 2 hours, Max," Jessica promised, kissing my forehead with those lips that now seemed poisonous to me. "Rest, Mom. Tomorrow will be a very important day." Yes, I thought, tomorrow would be very important, but not in the way they imagined. After they left, I lay in bed, counting every second that passed. 20 minutes had gone by since my call with Arthur, which meant Sarah should arrive in 10 more minutes. But 10 minutes could feel like an eternity when your life is in danger. I tried to stay calm by remembering all the years Arthur had worked for me. He had handled the sale of my first properties when my husband died. He had structured the investments that had made me wealthy. He had drafted contracts. He had resolved legal disputes. If anyone could get me out of this nightmare, it was him. Exactly 30 minutes after my phone call, a young woman appeared at the door of my room. It was Sarah, Arthur's assistant, a woman of about 25 with brown hair tied back in a ponytail and dressed in a gray business suit. She was carrying a small suitcase and wore an expression of determination that filled me with hope. "Mrs. Sterling," she said in a low voice, approaching my bed. "I'm Sarah. I work with attorney Arthur Vance. He sent me to help you." "Thank God," I whispered, feeling an enormous sense of relief. "Did you bring what I need?" "Everything is here," Sarah replied, opening the suitcase. "Comfortable clothes, shoes, identification documents, cash, and the keys to a car that's waiting for you in the hospital parking garage." Sarah took out a simple outfit: jeans, a white blouse, a light jacket, and sneakers. All in my exact size. Arthur had thought of every detail. "What's the plan?" I asked as I slowly sat up in bed. "Mr. Vance is currently filing a formal complaint with the district attorney's office. He has the recording of your phone call as initial evidence and has already requested a full investigation into your daughter, your son-in-law, and Nurse Mark. In the meantime, we have to get you out of here immediately. And how are we going to do that without anyone seeing us?" Sarah smiled with a confidence that calmed me. "I've already taken care of that. I spoke with the hospital administration and told them you had requested to be transferred to a private clinic for a second medical opinion. It's completely legal and normal in cases of complex heart surgeries." "Brilliant," I murmured, impressed by the efficiency of Arthur and his team. "You need to get dressed quickly, Mrs. Sterling. In 5 minutes, an official orderly will be here to get you for the transfer. Your daughter and son-in-law won't be back for another hour, by my calculations, so we have plenty of time." I got out of bed with trembling legs but with a steely determination. It was the first time in hours I felt I had any control over my own life. Sarah helped me out of the hospital gown and into the clothes she had brought. The jeans fit perfectly, the blouse was soft and comfortable, and the sneakers gave me a sense of stability I hadn't felt since the morning. "Do I look presentable?" I asked, looking at myself in the small mirror in the room. "Perfect. You look like a normal woman leaving the hospital after a routine consultation. No one will suspect a thing." Sarah packed my hospital gown into the suitcase and checked to make sure no evidence of what had just happened was left behind. Then she handed me a folder with documents. "These are the medical transfer papers. If anyone asks, you are going to the street, Raphael Clinic for a specialized cardiology consultation. A Dr. Harris is waiting for you there." Is there really a Dr. Harris waiting for me? Of course. Mr. Vance took care of everything. You are actually going to have a full medical consultation to document your current state of health. That will be important for the legal investigation. At that moment, we heard footsteps in the hallway. Sarah and I tensed up, but it was exactly who we were expecting: a uniformed orderly with a wheelchair. "Mrs. Catherine Sterling?" The man, an older gentleman of about 50 with a professional expression, asked. "I'm here to transfer you to the Street Raphael Clinic." "Yes, that's me," I replied, feeling my heart race again, but this time with excitement instead of terror. Sarah helped me into the wheelchair and placed the suitcase on my lap. "Remember, Mrs. Sterling, stay calm. Everything is under control." As the orderly pushed my chair down the hospital hallways, I felt as if I were escaping from a prison. Every foot we advanced took me further from the death trap my own family had prepared. We passed the reception desk, the waiting room, the doctor's offices, and finally reached the main entrance. The afternoon sun hit my face like a divine caress. Just a few hours ago, I had entered this hospital believing I was going for a life-saving surgery. Now I knew I had been about to voluntarily walk into my own execution. "The car is over there," Sarah said, pointing to a silver sedan parked near the entrance. "The keys are in my purse. Can you walk that far?" "Of course," I replied, getting up from the wheelchair with an energy I hadn't felt in weeks. "Sarah, I don't know how to thank you for all of this." "Don't thank me, Mrs. Sterling. Thank Mr. Vance when you see him. He moved heaven and earth to organize all of this in 30 minutes. We walked to the car, and Sarah helped me into the passenger seat. When she closed the door and got behind the wheel, I could finally exhale completely for the first time since I had overheard that terrible conversation. "Where are we going now?" I asked as Sarah started the engine. "First to the Street Raphael Clinic for your medical consultation, then to a safe place where you can rest while Mr. Vance handles the legal situation. Your daughter and son-in-law are in for a big surprise when they get back to the hospital." As we drove away from the hospital, I looked in the rearview mirror and saw the building getting smaller in the distance. It was the place where I had almost died, but it was also the place where my resurrection had begun. As Sarah drove through the city streets, I couldn't stop checking the rearview mirrors, expecting to see Michael's car appear at any moment. My hands trembled slightly, but it was no longer just from fear, but also from a strange mix of adrenaline and hope I hadn't felt in years. "Mrs. Sterling," Sarah said, noticing my nervousness, "you can relax. Right now, your daughter and son-in-law are having a quiet lunch, believing you're resting in your hospital room. They won't realize anything until an hour from now, when they return and find you gone. And what will happen when they realize? Won't they try to find me? Of course, they will. But by then, you will be in a completely safe place, surrounded by witnesses and with medical documentation proving you are perfectly lucid and in control of your mental faculties. They won't be able to do a thing." The Street Raphael Clinic was located in an elegant part of the city, surrounded by well-kept gardens and with a modern architecture that inspired confidence. It was completely different from the hospital, where I had been smaller, more personal, more welcoming. Dr. Harris turned out to be a man in his 60s with graying hair and a genuine smile that immediately put me at ease. His office was decorated with medical diplomas, family photographs, and plants that gave it a homey atmosphere. "Mrs. Sterling," he said after giving me a complete physical exam, "according to all the tests we've just run, you are in excellent physical and mental condition for a person your age. Your blood pressure is stable, your heart rate is normal, and mentally you are completely alert and oriented." "Does that mean I don't need the surgery urgently?" I asked, hopeful. "Well, you do have a heart condition that will eventually require surgical intervention, but it is not an immediate emergency. We could wait a few weeks, even months, to schedule it properly. It was definitely not necessary to operate on you today." Those words were like music to my ears. Jessica and Michael had chosen that specific day not because it was medically urgent, but because it was convenient for their criminal plans. "Doctor," I continued, "I need to ask you something very important. If I had been operated on today, and during recovery, I had been given an extra dose of morphine, what would have happened?" Dr. Harris frowned gravely. "A morphine overdose in a post-operative patient could cause severe respiratory depression, a coma, and even death." "Why do you ask, Mrs. Sterling?" "Because I believe someone was planning to do exactly that." The doctor became visibly serious. "That is a very grave accusation. If you have suspicions that someone wanted to deliberately harm you, you must report it to the authorities immediately." "We are already on it, doctor. My lawyer is handling the situation." After completing all the medical exams and obtaining copies of all the results, Sarah and I headed to what would be my temporary refuge, a suite in a luxury hotel in the city center. Arthur had thought of everything. It was a place where I would be safe, comfortable, and surrounded by witnesses 24 hours a day. The suite was spacious and elegant, with a spectacular view of the city. It had a living room, a large bedroom, a luxurious bathroom, and most importantly for my situation, 24-hour phone service and private security in the building. "Mr. Vance will be here in an hour," Sarah informed me as she organized my few belongings. "In the meantime, you can rest, order room service, or whatever you need. I will stay here until he arrives." I sat on the living room sofa, and for the first time all day, I could truly process what had happened. My own daughter, the child I had raised with so much love, had planned my death. The man I considered a son had calculated the value of my life in dollars. It was a betrayal so deep, so painful, that a part of me still couldn't fully believe it. But at the same time, I felt a strange sense of liberation. For years, perhaps without realizing it, I had been living to please others, trying to be the perfect mother, the perfect mother-in-law, the perfect grandmother. I had given my all without asking for anything in return, believing that was love. Now I realized I had been living a lie. The room phone rang, interrupting my reflections. It was the hotel reception. Mrs. Sterling, there is a couple down here asking for you. They say they are your daughter and son-in-law. Would you like us to let them up? My heart immediately raced. No, I replied firmly. I do not want to see them. Please tell them I am not registered at this hotel. Understood, Mrs. Sterling. Is there anything else we can do for you? Yes. If that couple insists or causes any trouble, call the police immediately. Sarah, who had heard the conversation, went to the window and looked down at the street. I see them, she said. They're standing in front of the hotel, talking heatedly. Jessica looks very upset, and Michael is on the phone. How did they find me so quickly? They probably called every hotel and clinic in the city. But don't worry, Mrs. Sterling. They can't do anything. You are here of your own free will. You are a competent adult, and you have every right to be wherever you want. 20 minutes later, the phone rang again. This time it was Arthur's familiar voice. Catherine, I've just arrived at the hotel. Are you all right? Yes, Arthur, I'm fine. But Jessica and Michael are down here looking for me. I know. I saw them when I arrived. Don't worry, they're leaving now. Apparently, the hotel staff made it very clear that they could not disturb you. 5 minutes later, Arthur knocked on the door of my suite. Seeing him, I felt an enormous relief. Arthur was a man in his 50s, tall, with perfectly coiffed gray hair, always dressed in impeccable suits, and with that calm but authoritative presence that characterizes the best lawyers. Catherine, he said, hugging me with the warmth of a long-standing friendship, I am so glad to see you safe. When I got your call this morning, I couldn't believe what you were telling me. Arthur, thank you for everything you've done today. You literally saved my life. Don't thank me yet, Catherine. The day is just beginning. Now we have to make sure Jessica and Michael pay for what they were about to do. Arthur sat across from me and pulled a folder full of documents from his briefcase. I want you to know exactly what's happening and what our next steps are. I'm listening. First, this morning I filed a formal complaint with the district attorney's office for conspiracy to commit murder. I have the recording of our phone conversation as initial evidence. Second, I requested a full investigation of Jessica and Michael's finances to determine if they have been gradually stealing money from you over the years. That possibility hadn't occurred to me, but it made a lot of sense. Do you think they've been stealing from me? It's very possible, Catherine. People who plan such an elaborate murder have likely been preparing for a long time. Third, I have already contacted Street, Joseph's hospital, to investigate Nurse Mark. If he really accepted money to kill you, we will have solid evidence. And the fake will they mentioned? That's an excellent question. Tomorrow, we will go to my office together to review your real will and ensure it is completely protected. We will also create new security measures so that no one can forge your legal documents. Arthur continued explaining the legal details, but I was thinking about something more personal. Arthur, what's going to happen to my grandchildren? They're innocent in all of this. I understand your concern, Catherine, and it's very noble of you to think of them after what their parents tried to do to you. Legally, we can structure things to protect the children's future without benefiting Jessica and Michael. How? We can create a special trust fund for your grandchildren, managed by a neutral third party. The money would be available for their education, health, and necessary expenses, but Jessica and Michael would never be able to touch it. I liked the idea immediately. My grandchildren were not to blame for their parents' crimes, and they deserve to have a secure future. There's something else, Catherine, Arthur continued with a more serious expression. Tonight, Jessica and Michael are going to realize their plans have completely failed. They are going to be desperate, and desperate people can do unpredictable things. Therefore, starting tomorrow, you will have personal security protection 24 hours a day. Is that really necessary? Absolutely. We have ruined a plan that would have netted them $2 million. We don't know how far they are willing to go to get that money back. At that moment, my room phone rang again. It was the front desk. Mrs. Sterling, the couple who was here earlier, has just returned. This time, they brought 2 small children. They are in the lobby and say the children want to see their grandmother. My grandchildren. Jessica had brought my grandchildren to emotionally blackmail me. I felt as if a dagger had been plunged into my heart. Using my grandchildren as emotional blackmail was a cruelty that went beyond anything I had imagined. Arthur, who had heard the conversation, looked at me with understanding and, at the same time, professional concern. Catherine, this is exactly what we expected. They are going to use every emotional resource possible to manipulate you. What do you want to do? My hands trembled as I held the receiver. I could perfectly picture the scene in the lobby. My little Leo and Sophia, 5 and 7 years old respectively, confused and scared, wondering why they couldn't see their grandmother. Jessica had probably told them I was sick, that I needed to see them urgently. Tell them to come up, I finally said to the receptionist. But only the children. The adults stay in the lobby. Catherine, Arthur immediately intervened. I don't think that's a good idea. They could be using the children to get to you. Arthur, those children are innocent. I can't refuse to see my grandchildren without an explanation, but you're right about the adults. They are not coming up. I called reception again. Please, tell them the children can come up alone, but the adults must stay downstairs. If they do not agree to that condition, they should leave. 5 minutes later, I heard soft knocking at the door. When I opened it, I found my 2 grandchildren standing in the hallway, holding hands, with those angelic faces that always melted my heart. Leo was wearing his favorite superhero t-shirt, and Sophia was wearing a pink dress I had given her for her last birthday. Grandma Catherine, Sophia shouted, running to hug me. Mommy said you were sick in the hospital, but then they said you were gone. We were worried. Leo approached more shyly. Grandma, why didn't you come home today? Mommy and Daddy were very angry. They said bad words in the car. I hugged them both, feeling tears begin to stream down my cheeks. These were my treasures, the only innocent ones in this whole nightmare. They had no idea that their parents had planned to murder their grandmother to steal her money. My loves, I said, leading them to the sweet sofa. Grandma is fine. I just had to change some plans at the hospital, and now I'm staying in this hotel for a few days. Why in a hotel? Sophia asked with that typical childhood curiosity. Why not at your house? Arthur, who had been watching silently from a corner of the room, approached with a kind smile. Hello, kids. I'm Arthur, your grandmother's lawyer. She's staying here because she has some important work matters to resolve. Leo looked at him suspiciously. Are you a good guy? Mommy says some lawyers are bad. I'm one of the good guys, Arthur replied with a genuine smile. My job is to protect your grandmother and make sure she is safe. For the next 20 minutes, I tried to act normally, playing with my grandchildren, listening to their stories about school, asking about their friends. But the whole time, my mind was working furiously, trying to figure out how I was going to handle this situation long term. Grandma, Sophia said suddenly, why can't Mommy and Daddy come up? They're sad downstairs. Mommy was crying. That question broke my heart. How could I explain to a 7-year-old girl that her mother had planned to kill her grandmother? How could I protect her innocence while protecting myself? Sometimes adults have difficult conversations that children don't need to hear, I answered carefully. Mommy and Daddy will understand. The important thing is that you know that Grandma loves you so much, more than anything in the world. Are you going to come to our house on Sunday like always? Leo asked. My heart shattered completely. Sundays at my house with my grandchildren had been the best part of my life for the past few years. But now I knew it had all been a lie, a theatrical performance to keep me trusting until the time came to execute their plans. I don't know, my love. Things are going to be a little different for a while. But you will always be able to see your grandmother. I promise you that. Arthur gave me a discreet signal, pointing to his watch. The children had been with me for half an hour, and Jessica and Michael were likely growing more impatient in the lobby. My treasures, I told them. You have to go back to Mommy and Daddy now. But I want you to remember something very important. No matter what happens, your grandmother loves you more than life itself. I hugged them tightly, inhaling that sweet scent of little children, memorizing the feeling of their small arms around my neck. I didn't know when I would see them again, or under what circumstances. I love you, Grandma, Sophia whispered in my ear. And I love you, my princess. And you too, Leo. After the children left, I stood by the window, watching as Jessica, Michael, and my grandchildren exited the hotel and got into their car. From my 10th floor perspective, they looked like tiny figures, but I could see the tension in their movements, the aggressive way Michael slammed the car door. "That was very brave of you," Arthur said, approaching the window. "I know how difficult that must have been." "Arthur, I need to know something. Is it possible for me to maintain a relationship with my grandchildren without having contact with Jessica and Michael?" "Legally, it's complicated, but not impossible. As a grandmother, you have certain visitation rights, especially if you can prove that it's important for the children's emotional well-being. But it's going to be a long and difficult legal battle. I don't care how long or difficult it is. Those children are the only pure thing I have left in this life. I will not let their parents take them from me too." The room phone rang again. This time it was a different voice at the reception, more formal, more official. "Mrs. Sterling, this is the head of hotel security. We have a problem. The couple who came looking for you has returned again. But this time, they brought reporters and television cameras. They are outside the hotel claiming you have been kidnapped and that they are worried for your well-being." Arthur and I exchanged alarmed glances. This was an escalation we hadn't anticipated. "Reporters?" I asked in disbelief. "Yes, ma'am. There are 2 news vans parked outside, and the couple is giving interviews saying that you disappeared mysteriously from the hospital, and they suspect someone is holding you against your will." Arthur immediately took the phone. "This is attorney Arthur Vance. I am Mrs. Sterling's legal representative. I want you to know that she is here completely of her own free will, of sound mind, and is under no circumstances being held against her will." "I understand, Mr. Vance, but the reporters are asking for a direct statement from Mrs. Sterling to confirm she is all right." Arthur looked at me questioningly. "It was my decision. Tell them that in 1 hour, Mrs. Sterling will hold a press conference in the hotel lobby to clarify the entire situation," I replied with a determination that surprised me. Arthur hung up the phone and looked at me with concern. "Catherine, are you sure you want to do this? A press conference is very public, very final. Once you publicly accuse your daughter and son-in-law, there will be no turning back." "Arthur, they were the ones who decided to make this public. They were the ones who brought reporters and cameras. If they want to play dirty, we can play dirty. But this time, I am going to win." For the first time all day, I felt an inner strength I didn't know I had. I was no longer the scared victim who had escaped the hospital that morning. I was no longer the naive old woman who had blindly trusted her family. I was Catherine Sterling, a woman who had built a $2 million empire from scratch and was ready to fight. "All right," Arthur said, opening his briefcase again. "Then we are going to prepare a press conference they will never forget. But first, I need you to tell me every detail of the conversation you heard this morning. Every word, every name, every figure. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it completely." For the next 40 minutes, Arthur and I carefully prepared my statement. We went over every detail of the day's events, organized the evidence we had, and planned exactly what I was going to say and how I was going to say it. "Remember, Catherine," Arthur told me as we went down in the elevator to the lobby, "stay calm, speak clearly, and tell only the truth. The truth is always your best defense." When the elevator doors opened, I could see the lobby filled with reporters, cameras, and flashing lights. In the front row were Jessica and Michael, with expressions of absolute shock and terror. They had finally realized that their perfect victim was not so perfect after all. It was time to begin my revenge. The hotel lobby had transformed into a media circus. There were at least a dozen reporters with microphones, 3 television cameras, and photographers constantly firing flashes. The hotel manager had improvised a small podium near the reception desk, and chairs were arranged in rows as if for a presidential press conference. When the elevator appeared and they saw me step out, the murmur of conversation stopped abruptly. All eyes turned to me, a 72-year-old woman, dressed simply in jeans and a white blouse, walking with a steady pace toward the podium. Arthur was by my right side, exuding that professional confidence that only the best lawyers possess. But the gazes that struck me the most were those of Jessica and Michael. My daughter was as pale as a sheet, her eyes wide, her hands visibly trembling. Michael had a clenched jaw and an expression of barely controlled panic. It was in that moment that I realized the power I held in my hands. They had come here expecting to control the narrative, expecting to present themselves as the worried family looking for their missing mother. They never imagined that I would take control of the situation. I stood behind the podium and adjusted the microphone. The sound echoed through the lobby, and the silence became absolute. For a few seconds, I simply observed the audience, letting the tension build. "Good afternoon," I began, my voice clear and firm. "My name is Catherine Sterling. I am 72 years old. I am of sound mind, and I am here of my own free will to clarify a very serious situation that has affected my life and my family." The cameras moved in closer, reporters readied their recorders, and I could see Jessica and Michael exchange desperate glances. "This morning," I continued, "I was at St. Joseph's Hospital awaiting a scheduled heart surgery. 30 minutes before entering the operating room, I happened to overhear a conversation between my daughter Jessica and my son-in-law, Michael, that changed my life forever." A murmur of anticipation rippled through the audience. The reporters leaned forward, knowing they were about to hear something extraordinary. I heard them discussing in detail how they were going to benefit from my death during the surgery. They spoke of a forged will, of a corrupt nurse who would receive $5,000 to administer a lethal dose of morphine to me during recovery, and of how they would divide my $2 million inheritance. The lobby erupted in exclamations of shock. The camera flashes intensified, and I could see several reporters speaking urgently into their phones, probably to their newsrooms. "That's a lie!" Michael shouted from his seat, jumping up abruptly. "This woman is senile. She's making up crazy stories." "Sir," Arthur intervened immediately, stepping to the microphone, "I suggest you remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in the legal proceedings that are already underway." Jessica also stood up, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, how can you say such horrible things about us? We love you. We were desperately looking for you, because we thought something terrible had happened to you." My daughter's performance was so convincing that, for a moment, even I doubted what I had heard. But then I remembered every poisonous word that had come from her mouth that morning, every macabre detail of their plan. "Jessica," I said, looking her directly in the eye, "name the nurse that Michael bribed with $5,000. She was completely speechless. Her face turned even paler, and her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "Name the crooked notary who was going to process the fake will." Absolute silence. "Tell me how much you calculated my downtown properties were worth." Michael grabbed Jessica's arm, trying to pull her out of the lobby. "We don't have to listen to these ridiculous accusations." "Let's go, Jessica." But the reporters immediately surrounded them, blocking their exit with microphones and cameras. "Is it true you plan to kill your mother-in-law?" a reporter shouted. "Can you confirm or deny the specific accusations she has made?" another asked. "Where are Mrs. Sterling's grandchildren? Are you using them for emotional blackmail?" The questions rained down from all directions, and I could see Michael and Jessica crumbling under the pressure. They could no longer maintain their masks of a concerned family. Pure panic had taken over their faces. I returned to the microphone to continue my statement. "I want everyone to know that I am not acting out of revenge or resentment. I am acting to save my life. This morning, I literally escaped my own execution." "Mrs. Sterling," a reporter from the back shouted, "do you have physical evidence of these accusations?" Arthur stepped up to the microphone. "We have a recording of the phone call Mrs. Sterling made to me from the hospital, where she recounted in real time what she had heard. We have medical documentation proving that her surgery was not urgent and could have been postponed. And we have an ongoing investigation into the finances of the accused and the mentioned hospital staff." "Has the nurse, Mark, been arrested?" another reporter asked. "That information is part of the active investigation by the district attorney's office," Arthur replied professionally. At that moment, Jessica broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. "Mom, please! The children are watching us on television. Think about your grandchildren." That mention of my grandchildren filled me with a cold, calculated fury. "Now you worry about the children, Jessica? When you plan to leave them without a grandmother so you could buy a house in Miami?" The precision of that detail hit her like a slap. She had specifically mentioned Miami during their morning conversation, a detail I couldn't possibly have invented. "We didn't say anything about Miami," Michael muttered, but his voice was so weak it was barely audible. "Didn't you?" I replied, pulling a small notebook from my purse. "You also said that with $2 million, you could travel through Europe, buy designer clothes, dine at the best restaurants. Do you want me to continue reading my notes?" The color drained completely from their faces. They realized that not only had I heard them, but I had meticulously documented every detail of their conversation. "Mrs. Sterling," a television reporter asked, "what will happen now with your relationship with your daughter and son-in-law?" It was the question I had been waiting for, the opportunity to send my most important message. "My relationship with these people is over, forever," I declared, with a firmness that echoed throughout the lobby. When someone plans your murder for money, there is no forgiveness possible, no reconciliation possible. Trust, once broken in this way, can never be repaired. And your grandchildren? My grandchildren are innocent in all of this. I will do everything legally in my power to maintain a relationship with them, protecting their financial future through trust funds that their parents will never be able to touch. Jessica let out a choked cry upon hearing that. The realization that they had not only lost the inheritance, but that I was actively excluding them from any future benefit hit her like a hammer. "You can't do that," she screamed. "We are your family." "My family would not have planned my death," I replied coldly. "My family would not have calculated the value of my life in dollars. My family would not have bribed nurses to poison me. You stopped being my family this morning when you decided I was worth more dead than alive." The reporters were writing furiously, the cameras capturing every gesture, every tear, every moment of this devastating confrontation. I knew this press conference would be national news, maybe even international. The story of an elderly woman who discovered her own family's murder plot and managed to escape was the kind of drama that captivated audiences. "One last thing," I added, moving closer to the microphone. "I want to send a message to all the seniors who are listening to me. Do not trust blindly, not even in your own family. Protect your legal documents, maintain control over your finances, and always have an independent lawyer who looks out for your interests." Arthur nodded in approval. "My message of empowerment for other older adults would be perfect. Will you be taking legal action?" a reporter shouted. "We are already taking it," Arthur replied. "We have filed criminal charges for conspiracy to commit murder, and we are investigating possible financial fraud that may have been occurring for years." It was the final blow. Not only were we accusing them of the murder plot, but we had planted the seed that there could be more financial crimes in the past. Michael finally managed to push his way through the reporters, dragging Jessica toward the exit. But before he left, he turned and shouted at me with a voice full of venom. "This isn't over, you crazy old woman. We are going to take everything you have." Those words were captured by every camera and microphone present. It was the public confirmation that his intentions toward me were anything but loving. He had sealed his own fate with that public threat. As they left the hotel, pursued by reporters and cameras, I stood behind the podium, feeling a strange mixture of triumph and deep sadness. I had won this battle, but I had lost my family forever. But at least I was still alive to fight another day. The next 48 hours were a media whirlwind unlike anything I had ever experienced in my life. The press conference had gone viral on all social media platforms, national news channels had made my story their top headline, and my phone wouldn't stop ringing with calls from journalists, television producers, and even offers to write a book about my experience. Arthur had hired 2 professional bodyguards, who took turns protecting me 24 hours a day. It wasn't paranoia. It was a necessary precaution after the public threat Michael had made in front of the cameras. A man who plots his mother-in-law's murder for money is capable of anything when he sees his plans fall apart. "Catherine," Arthur told me during our breakfast in the hotel suite, "I have important news about the investigation." "I'm listening." First, they arrested Mark, the nurse. When investigators showed him the footage from the press conference and told him Michael had already mentioned him by name, he broke down immediately. He confessed everything: the $5,000, the plan for the extra morphine, the conversations he had with Michael over the past few weeks. I felt a mixture of satisfaction and horror. On one hand, we had definitive confirmation that everything I had heard was real. On the other, It was terrifying to know how close I had come to a meticulously planned death. Second, Arthur continued, we found evidence that Jessica and Michael have been stealing money from you for the past 3 years. Small amounts at first, but they gradually increased. In total, we estimate they took approximately $300,000. $300,000, I repeated in disbelief. How is it possible I didn't notice? They were very clever. They used their access to your bank accounts to make transfers that looked like legitimate expenses, property repairs that were never done, insurance policies that were never bought, fake investments. Michael has an accounting background that allowed him to cover his tracks very well. The betrayal was even deeper than I had imagined. Not only had they planned to kill me, but they had been systematically stealing from me for years. And the crooked notary? That's where it gets interesting, Arthur said with a cunning smile. We couldn't find any crooked notary willing to forge your will. We believe Michael was lying, maybe to impress Jessica or to sound more confident in the plan. He probably thought he would sort out that detail after your death. So the plan wasn't as well organized as I thought. Exactly. It was the plan of 2 amateurs desperate for money, not professional criminals, which makes them more dangerous in some ways, but also easier to catch. At that moment, my personal cell phone rang. It was a number I recognized immediately. My brother David, who lived in another city and with whom I had gradually lost contact over the last few years. Catherine? I heard his familiar voice, full of concern. I just saw the news. I can't believe what's happening. Are you okay? David, I replied, feeling a genuine emotion for the first time in days. It's so good to hear your voice. Yes, I'm okay. Scared, betrayed, but alive. Sister, I'm coming over there immediately. You shouldn't be going through this alone. I'm not alone, David. I have an excellent lawyer and security protection, but I would love to see you. I'm on the next flight. I'll be there tonight. After hanging up, I realized something important. For years, I had been so focused on pleasing Jessica and Michael that I had neglected other family relationships. David was my younger brother, an honest, hard-working man who had never asked me for anything. Maybe it was time to reconnect with the people who truly loved me unconditionally. Arthur interrupted my thoughts. Catherine, there's something else we need to discuss. Jessica and Michael have hired a lawyer and are preparing their defense. What kind of defense? They are going to claim you have senile dementia, that you invented the whole story, and that you are being manipulated by me to change your will in my favor. The audacity of that strategy left me speechless. How can they claim dementia when I have medical exams proving I'm perfectly lucid? They will argue that the exams were conducted after I supposedly manipulated you and are therefore invalid. They will also bring witnesses to say that you have been confused lately. What witnesses? Probably neighbors, domestic employees, anyone they can convince or pay to say what they need. The realization that the battle was just beginning hit me like a cold wave. I had won the first round with the press conference, but they weren't going to give up easily. $300,000 already stolen, plus $2 million in potential inheritance, was worth fighting dirty for. What do we do? I asked. We document everything. We record all our conversations. We photograph all our meetings. We gather testimonies from people who can attest to your mental lucidity. And most importantly, you must continue to live your life normally, proving day by day that you are in full control of your faculties. That afternoon, while Arthur worked on the legal documents, I sat by the window of my suite, looking out at the city spread before me. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. I no longer had to pretend to enjoy those tense family dinners. I no longer had to listen to Michael's condescending advice about my finances. I no longer had to act like the perfect grandmother while they robbed me behind my back. My phone rang again. This time, it was an unknown number. Mrs. Sterling, a young female voice said, "My name is Valerie. I'm an investigative journalist. I've been following your case, and I'd like to make you a proposal." What kind of proposal? We want to make a documentary about your story, not just about the attempted murder, but about the broader issue of financial abuse of the elderly. Your case could help thousands of people in similar situations. The idea immediately intrigued me. If my horrible experience could serve to protect other seniors from being victimized by their own families, then maybe all this pain would have been worth it. I'm interested, I replied, but I would have to speak with my lawyer first. Of course. We also want to assure you that you would have complete editorial control over how your story is presented. We don't want to exploit your tragedy, but to empower you to help others. After hanging up, I thought about the extraordinary turn my life had taken. 3 days ago, I was a naive old woman who blindly trusted her family. Now I was a survivor, a potential activist, a woman who had reclaimed control over her destiny. My brother David arrived that night, and for the first time in 72 hours, I could completely relax. Being with someone who loved me unconditionally, who had no hidden agenda, who simply wanted to make sure I was okay, reminded me what it felt like to have a real family. "Catherine," he said, as we had dinner in the suite, "I always knew there was something strange about Michael. Too charming, too interested in your business. But I never imagined it would come to this. Why did you never say anything? Because you seemed happy. And after Robert died, I was afraid you would think I was jealous of your new family." It was another painful but important lesson. Sometimes the people who truly love us stay silent so as not to hurt us, while those who want to harm us never stop speaking sweetly. That night, for the first time since the hospital, I slept soundly. Tomorrow, a new phase of my life would begin, and I was ready to face it. 6 months after that life-changing press conference, I am sitting in my new office, reviewing the final documents from the trial. Arthur just called to confirm what we already knew was going to happen. Jessica and Michael were sentenced to 8 years in prison for conspiracy to commit murder and financial fraud. Mark, the corrupt nurse, received 5 years for attempted murder. Justice had finally been served. The documentary Valerie produced about my story became a national phenomenon. Titled "The Grandmother Who Saved Herself," it has been seen by over 5 million people and has inspired changes in elder protection laws in 3 states. I have received over 10,000 letters from people sharing their own stories of family abuse, and many have managed to protect themselves thanks to my example. My brother David moved to live near me, and we have rebuilt the family relationship I had lost for years. It turns out that when you surround yourself with people who truly love you, life becomes much richer and more meaningful. The most complicated part of all has been the situation with my grandchildren. After months of legal battles, I managed to obtain supervised visitation rights. I see them every other Saturday at a family center, under the supervision of a social worker. At first, it was painful and artificial, but gradually we have begun to rebuild our relationship. Leo, now 6, asked me last week why his parents were in the place where people who do bad things go. I explained, in words he could understand, that sometimes people make wrong choices that hurt others, and they have to learn to be better. "But you're still our grandma, right?" Sophia asked with those little eyes that still melt my heart. "Forever and always," I replied. "No matter what happens, I will always be your grandma who loves you more than anything in the world." I have established educational trust funds for both children that will guarantee them the best possible education without their parents being able to touch a cent. When they turn 18, they will have access to enough funds for college and to start their adult lives independently. My health, ironically, has improved considerably since I escaped that death trap. The stress of living with constant lies was slowly killing me, without me even realizing it. Now, surrounded by honesty and genuine love, my blood pressure has stabilized and my heart has grown stronger. I still need the surgery eventually, but it's no longer urgent. I have used my newfound fame to create the Catherine Sterling Foundation for the Protection of Seniors. We work with lawyers, social workers, and authorities to identify and prevent financial and physical abuse of the elderly by their own families. It is heartbreaking to discover how common this problem is, but it is also hopeful to see how many people we can help. Arthur is still my lawyer and has become one of my best friends. He helped me not only survive the crisis, but transform it into a purpose. "Catherine," he told me recently, "you turned the greatest betrayal of your life into its most important triumph." At 73, I have learned lessons I wish I had known sooner. Real family is not defined by blood, but by genuine love and loyalty. Forgiveness is not always possible or necessary when someone has tried to destroy you. And it is never, ever too late to take control of your own life and write a new chapter. Jessica has sent me several letters from prison, begging me to forgive her, claiming it was all Michael's idea, that she was a victim of manipulation. but I know the truth. I heard her voice that morning in the hospital. I heard the coldness with which she calculated my death. I heard the genuine excitement when she talked about spending my money in Miami. There is no forgiveness for that. There is no second chance for someone who plans your murder. Michael, for his part, still maintains that I am a crazy old woman who made everything up. Even from prison, he continues with his narrative of victimization. But the evidence was overwhelming. Mark's confession, the bank records of the thefts, the recordings of our conversations, and the testimony of multiple witnesses about my mental lucidity. This morning, while reviewing the requests for help that arrive at my foundation, I found a letter that particularly caught my attention. It was from a 68-year-old woman in a situation very similar to the one I lived through, suspecting that her son and daughter-in-law were planning something terrible to seize her inheritance. "Mrs. Sterling," she wrote, "your story saved my life. When I read about your experience, I realized that the signs I was seeing in my own family were not my paranoia. I sought legal help, hired private investigators, and we discovered that they had indeed forged several documents and were planning to have me declared mentally incompetent. Letters like that remind me why it was worth exposing my most intimate pain to the entire world. At the end of the day, when I returned to my new home, smaller but infinitely more peaceful than the last, I sit in my garden and reflect on the extraordinary journey my life has been. I lost a daughter and a son-in-law, but I gained a chosen family of people who truly value me. I lost my innocence about the unconditional goodness of family, but I gained wisdom and strength I never knew I had. And most importantly, I am alive, not just physically, but spiritually more alive than I have been in years. 30 minutes before my surgery, I heard the plan that was meant to end my life. But those 30 minutes were not the end of my story. They were the beginning of my rebirth. To everyone who may be listening to this story, trust your instincts, protect your legal documents, maintain control over your finances, and remember that it is never too late to defend your right to live with dignity and respect. The truth always finds its way, and justice, though sometimes delayed, always arrives. My name is Catherine Sterling. I am 73 years old, and this is my story of survival.